Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, inshallah, we're going to discuss the price elasticity of supply and the relationship between the elasticity and the tax incidence or the tax burden. So let's start with the price elasticity of supply. Price elasticity of supply. The price elasticity of supply is quite similar to the price elasticity of demand. So, ED or ES means the price elasticity of supply equals delta Q S percent over delta P percent. So the price elasticity of supply is the percentage change in the quantity supplied over the price, the change in the price, or the percentage change in the price. So the price elasticity of supply illustrates or represents the relationship between the price and the quantity supplied. If the price increased, increasing the prices, this would encourage the producers to produce more and more, so the quantity supplied would increase. So in general, this leads to encouraging the producers to produce more. Then the quantity supplied would increase. So in general, there is a positive relationship between the prices and the quantity supplied. When the price increased, the quantity supplied would increase, right? So let's discuss how to calculate the price elasticity of supply. We have three formulas to calculate the price elasticity of supply. Number one, the percentage formula, which is EDES equals delta QS, or the percentage change in quantity supply over the percentage change in the prices. The second one is ES, the general formula, which is delta QS over delta P times P1 over QS1. This is the general formula to calculate the price elasticity of supply. And the last one is the midpoint formula. Yes. E S equals delta QS. Yes. Excellent. P1 plus P2 over QS1 plus QS2. This is the midpoint formula. Right? Okay? We're not going to take exercises because it's already discussed in the price elasticity of demand. When we discuss the price elasticity of demand, they cross the price elasticity of demand and income elasticity. So direct applications or direct using of these formulas, right? Who wants exercises related to the price elasticity of supply? Would you like to take exercises? Okay, let's take an exercise and apply or use the midpoint formula. If the prices, F, example, if the prices of chicken increased from 5 to 7 shekels per kilogram, then the quantity supplied increased from 10 to 12 kilogram a month. Calculate the cross price elasticity of supply. Calculate the cross price elasticity of supply. As you know, or as you see, the price is increased from 5 to 7. So this is P1, P2. P1 is 5 shekels. Price 2 is 7. Quant supplied increased from 10 to 12. So QS equals, or QS1 equals 10, and the QS2 equals 12. Right? So the price elasticity of supply, ES, equals, we are going to use the midpoint formula, equals delta QS means QS2 minus QS1. QS2 minus QS1 over P2 minus P1 times the summation of prices P1 plus P2 over QS1 plus QS2. So ES equals QS2 12 minus QS1 10 over P2 price 2 7 minus 5 times P1 plus P2. P1 5 plus 7 over 10 plus 12. So ES equals 2 over 2 times 5 plus 7, 12 over 22. So ES equals 12 over 20, 0.54. And the sign is positive. So as you see, the value of the price elasticity of supply is less than 1. So the supply is inelastic. And let's go to the diagram analysis to understand when does the elasticity supply, or the supply is elastic, inelastic, unitary, and perfectly elastic and inelastic, right? So in this case, when the price elasticity of supply is less than 1, supply is inelastic. Inelastic supply. It's quite similar, the price elasticity of demand. The difference is in the sign of the price elasticity of demand. And the price elasticity of demand, it was negative. But when we talk about the price elasticity of supply, the sign is positive. Okay, let's go or let's analyze the different cases or the different forms of the price elasticity of demand. Supply. When supply is elastic, inelastic, unitary, and perfectly elastic and inelastic. We have 5 cases. Price, quantity supplied. Price, quantity supplied. In the first case, this is the 0. We have 4 sides. Positive P, positive Q, negative P, negative QS. Right? Number 1, if supply is or intersects this is the supply curve, S. Suppose that we have 2 points. Point A, point B. This is P1, P2, QS1, QS2. As you see, when the price is increased from P1 to P2, the quantity supplied increased, but the magnitudes of a change or increasing the quantity demanded, supplied, is larger than the percentage or the magnitudes of a change in a price, or the percentage of change in the prices or increasing the prices is smaller than the percentage of change or increase in the quantity supply, so that the supply is elastic, because ES equals delta QS percent over delta P percent. When the percentage of change in the quantity supplied is larger than the percentage of change in the price, this would be elastic, larger than 1. So suppose the increasing price is 10% and increasing quantity is 20%. In this case, ES equals the percentage of change in the quantity supplied is 20 over 10% equals positive 2. Positive 2 is larger than 1, so supply is elastic, right? Would be perfectly inelastic. Yes. We're coming to this point, Muhammad.
The supply curve intersects the prices not zero above.
Yes, above. Yes. In this case, as you see, when supply is elastic, there is intersection, or the supply curve intersects the positive price. Yes. Why? No, sometimes it may be below. But for our case, yes, it's above the price. Okay? Or it's in the positive price. Right? Sometimes in the negative price. So it depends on the slope of the supply curve. Right? The second case is when supply is close to a vertical line. This is S. Supply curve. Price, quantity supplied, point A, point B. In this case, increasing the prices from P1 to P2 leads to a smaller increase in the quantity supply from QS1 to QS2. Right? So suppose that the percentage increasing the price is 10%. And the percent increasing quantity supply is 2%. In this case, ES equals delta QS percent over delta P percent. In this case, ES is larger than 1. 2% over 10%. 0.2. It's less than 1, so the supply is inelastic. Inelastic supply. Right? Okay? The third case, when supply is a unitary elastic. When supply is a unitary elastic, it starts from the 0 point. S, P, QS. This is point A, point B, price 1, price 2, QS1, QS2. As you see in this figure, that the percentage of change or increase in the price equals the percentage of change in quantity supplied. So suppose that there is an increase in the price by 10%, leads to the same increase in quantity supplied. So ES equals delta Q percent over delta P percent equals 10% over 10% equals 1. So if the price elasticity of supply equals 1, in this case, supply is a unitary elastic. Right? So ES equals 1 in this case, so it would be a unitary elastic supply curve. right? Is there a problem so far? What about the perfectly, or when supply curve is a vertical line? When supply is a vertical line. This is the fourth case. Suppose that the supply curve is a vertical line. This is S, P, Q, S, A, B. In this case, if the price increased from P1 to P2, there is no change in quantity supply. This is QS1 to QS2. Increasing the price leads to no change in quantity supplied. And we can see this case in the very short run. In the very short run, suppose that demand increased from D1 to D2. The producer doesn't have the capacity to increase the output or the quantity supplied. It's called in the very short run. We can see this case in the very short run, right? We are coming to this point to discuss the supply curve in the very short run, in the short run, in the long run, and the elasticity of the supply curve in these cases, right? So we can see the vertical supply curve in the very short run. So in this case, any increasing in the prices leads to no change in the quantity supplied. So ES, so suppose that we have increasing in the prices by 10%. There's no change in quantity supplied. So ES equals delta QS percent over delta P percent. ES equals, there is no change in quantity supplied. So E0, so delta Q or change in quantity supplied equals 0 over 10% equals 0. So the price elasticity of supply is 0, perfectly what? Excellent. Perfectly inelastic. Perfectly inelastic supply. So if the price elasticity of supply equals 0, supply is a vertical line, and what? The price elasticity of the supply equals 0, supply is a vertical line, and the supply is a perfectly inelastic, right? Okay. For the last case, let's go to the last case. When supply is a horizontal line. Sometimes we can see the supply curve is a horizontal line. P, QS, and supply curve is a horizontal line. This is supply curve. In this case, as you see, the price has not changed. P1 equals P2, and suppose this is point A, point B, QS1, QS2. Although there is no change in the price, the quantity supplied increase, and we can see this case in the very long term, right? In the very long term, supply would be a horizontal line or perfectly elastic. Why? ES, as you know, ES equals delta Q percent over delta P percent equals the percentage change in the quantity supplied. Suppose it was 10%. No, it's not 0. 10. Yes. Thank you. 10% over 0 equals infinity. So if the price elasticity of supply is infinity, the supply would be perfectly elastic. Yes. So as you see, the price elasticity of supply is infinity. In this case, it's called perfectly elastic supply. Perfectly elastic supply. Right? Okay? Okay. Let's go to analyze the supply curve or the form of supply curve and the very short run and the long run. We have three cases, or we are going to focus on three cases: supply curve in the very short run, the short run, and the long run. Okay? Supply curve. And number one, a very short run. Short run or short term? Yes. Before starting, I have a question. What is the difference between the short run and the long run? Is it related to a period of time, or it's related to the industry, the type of industry? Yes. Both. Yes.
By time.
Yes.
Short period time, producer not cannot
change the factors of production. Yes.
But in the long time he
can change all the factors of production. Okay. What about, I have another question. What about the short run for a chicken's farm and the short run for the cars or tractors farm? Tractors company or factory. Maybe what we consider as a long run or a short run and the tractors factory, maybe it would be a long term for the chicken's farm. Maybe the chicken's farm, the short run for the chicken farm may be 40 days, right? Or 2 weeks. But the short run for tractors factory may be 2 years. So it's not related to time. To distinguish between the long term and the short run or the short term, in the short term or in the long term, the producer can change all the factors of production. He can increase the number of workers. He can increase the number of machines. So all factors, in the long term, all factors of production would be changeable, right? But in the short term, at least one of the factors of production would be fixed, like the machines or capital, right? But in the short term, the producer can increase the number of workers in order to increase the production. Okay? So we have three terms. Number one is a very short term or a very short run. Number two, the short run. And the third one is the long run. And to understand the idea, the distinction between these two terms, suppose that you are the producer and you have a brakes factory. Brakes factory means masnatub. And the capacity utilization for this factory is to produce 1,000 brakes a day. You can produce only, or the maximum capacity is to produce only 1,000 brakes a day. Okay? So you have a brakes or brake factory. The maximum capacity or the capacity utilization, طاقة القصوى, capacity utilization as or equals producing or to produce a 1,000 bricks a day. A day. Okay? In the very short run, suppose that, or the supply curve would be a vertical line. Why? This is the very short run. Very short run.
You cannot increase the quantity supply
So-
for this product.
Excellent, excellent. Why? Suppose that we were at point A and the demand is D1. This is the equilibrium price for bricks in the market. This is P1, right? And this is the quantity. Suppose that someone came to the factory and asked you to produce 5,000 bricks a day. He asked you, so the demand increased. He asked you, and he said, tomorrow, Muhammad, Ali, tomorrow I want 5,000 bricks tomorrow. You don't have the capacity to produce 5,000 bricks in order to meet his requirement. Okay? So, the demand increased. This leads to increasing the prices. But there is no change in quantity supplied. Right? So this is S1, the QS1, and the QS2. It's called the very short run. Right? So in the very short run, supply curve would be a vertical line. P, Q. Right? But if he gives you more time to produce, suppose he asked you to produce 5,000 bricks, and he gives you a 1 week to produce. In this case, you can meet his requirement, right? Because in this case, supply would be more elastic. This is the very short run, and the second one is short run. In the short run, the producer would have the capacity to produce more. So supply would be more elastic, but it would still inelastic. This is S. A, P1, B, P2. This is the demand 1, demand 2. As you see, in the short run, supply is more elastic than the very short run. Because in the short run, supply curve is a vertical line. In the short run, it would be more elastic, but it's still inelastic supply. So, as you see, increasing demand leads to increasing supply by more increasing than the quantity supplied, QS1, QS2. So as you see, in the short run, the percentage change in the price is larger than the percentage change in quantity supplied, right? Okay. In the long term, supply curve would be more and more elastic. So it would be elastic. In the long term, the third case, in the long term, the producer can change all the factors of production. He can increase the number of machines, number of workers, right? So, yes, and raw material. So, in this case, supply curve would be more elastic. Sorry? No, in the very short, in the very long term, it would be perfectly elastic. But in the long term, no, it would be elastic, right? So S, elastic means if demand increase from D1 to D2, the percentage change in the price is smaller than the percentage change in a quantity supplied. So as you see, from A to B, QS1, QS2, the percentage change in the price is smaller than the percentage change in the quantity supplied. So the supply curve would be elastic. Right? Okay. We will go to another topic, which is the tax incidence or the tax burden. Elasticity and tax incidence. Elasticity and tax incidence. In all countries, the governments try to use the tax in order to meet its expenditures. Or they collect taxes, taxes is one of the major sources of fund for the government or revenues for the government. So it impose taxes on different goods and services. The major question is, who will bear the tax burden or the taxes which imposed on the different goods and services? The consumer or the buyers or the sellers? Sorry? It depends on what? Yes. So the tax burden, or you know that the producer will pay taxes for the government, right? But who will bear the share or the most or the least tax burden? We will see it, and it depends on the price elasticity of demand and supply. We have more than 12 cases, okay, to understand the idea and to analyze who will bear the most or the least or the whole of tax burden. Number one, we are going to analyze the relationship between the price elasticity of demand, or when the demand is elastic, inelastic, perfectly elastic, and so on, and its relationship with the tax burden. So we have 5 cases related to the price elasticity of demand and the tax burden. Number one, when demand is inelastic. When demand is inelastic. Demand is inelastic. Demand is inelastic means the product is very important for the consumer. It's not easy to give up at when the price increased. And what? Demand curve is close to a vertical line, right? So, suppose that the demand is inelastic. This is the price. Quantity. Demand is inelastic means it's close to a vertical line. This is D. Right? Suppose that the supply is a unitary elastic and it's S1. Right? This is the equilibrium point, E1. Suppose that the price of the product is $3 and the quantity demanded is 10. Right? Okay. Suppose that the government imposed a tax of $1, if the government imposed a tax of $1, the question is, what are the main consequences and effects of the imposed taxes on the prices, on supply, and who will bear the most and or the least of tax burden? The tax is one, and as you know, one of the determinants of supply is the tax. Increasing the taxes excellent leads to increasing the cost of production. Yes, Muhammad.
Declining in profits.
Yes.
Declining in profits.
Yes.
And therefore shifting supply.
Excellent. Yes. So this leads to a reduction in profits, a reduction in the ability to produce, and yes, and the production, and then the final result would be a reduction in supply. Reduction in supply. So there is a leftward shifting of supply curve or a backward shifting of supply curve. This leads to a leftward shifting of supply curve. So in this case, suppose that the equilibrium quantile price is E1, so the price is 3. The equilibrium price is the 3. The quantity, the equilibrium quantity is 10. If the government imposed a tax of $1, so there is a leftward shifting of supply curve. This is S2, right? And this is the value of tax. From S1 to S2, this is the tax, or the value of tax. It's the value of $1, right? Okay? So there is a new equilibrium point, which is E2, right? The question is, does the producer have the capacity to sell the product by 4? Or can he make the consumer pay all the taxes? Or is he going to pay all the taxes as a producer? It depends on the price elasticity of demand, or the demand is elastic or inelastic demand. So as you see, this is the value of tax from A1 to S2, right? So in this case, the total taxes would be 4. From 3 to 4, it's a 1. This is the value of taxes, right? Imposed. But as you see, at this point, a quantity supplied is larger than the quantity demanded, right? At this point, at a price 4, the quantity supplied is larger than the quantity demanded. At price 4, and suppose that the producer tries to make the consumer to pay the taxes, and he decided to increase the price to 4. In this case, at the price 4, a QS is larger than a QD. So there is an excess supply of goods. So, excess supply of goods, or a supply surplus. Supply surplus. Supply surplus leads to, if we have a supply surplus or excess supply of goods, the prices tend to what? To decline. So there is a tendency for prices to decline. The prices would decline to restore the equilibrium. حنوصل لهان. At this point, 3.75, right? So in this case, the new equilibrium price is 3.75. So the producer will be, when demand is inelastic, this means that the product is very important for the consumer. It's not easy to give up it when the price increase. So the consumer will bear the most of tax burden. The consumer will bear the most of tax burden, like the demand for telecommunication services or flour in Palestine. The demand, our example is the demand for telecommunication services in Palestine. The demand for this product is, or this service is inelastic. So if the government imposes taxes of $1, in this case, the consumer will bear the most of tax burden. قديش بيتحمل? How much does the consumer bear tax burden? The most, 75%. So when demand is inelastic, demand is inelastic, the producer or the consumer will bear the most of tax burden. By how much? $0.75, right? And the consumer or the producer will bear the least of tax burden. So let's come back to the diagram. So as you see, when the original price is 3, and the producer tried to sell the product or decided to sell the product by 3.75. So the consumer bear the 0.75 of this dollar, right? So the consumer will bear the most of tax burden when demand is inelastic, right? And the producer will bear the least, right? Yes. I will come back to this point, okay? I'm coming to this point later. Okay. Number 2, if the demand is elastic. When demand is, or the second case, when demand is elastic. Demand is elastic. Like the demand for banana. The product is not important for the consumer. It's easy to give up it when the price increased. And the percentage change in the quantity demanded would be larger than the percentage change in the prices. So, like the demand for banana. So suppose that this is the price quantity and the demand is elastic. It's close to a horizontal line. D. This is the origin supply curve, S1. And this is E1, the equilibrium point. The original equilibrium point, P1. So suppose it was 3. And this is 10. If the government imposed a tax of $1, supply would decline. So there is a leftward shifting of supply curve to S2, right? Okay? We have a new equilibrium price, which is this is the equilibrium, new equilibrium point, E2, and this is the new equilibrium price that the producer can sell his product. As you see, from E1 to S2, to this point at S2, suppose it was M. From E1 to M, this is the total of tax. The total of taxes per unit. It's a $1, right? So as you see, for this segment, this is 3 points. Suppose that the new price is 3.25. And so as you see, when demand is elastic, the consumer, the producer, it tries to increase the prices, but the price increased by a smaller amount. So, from a 3 to 2.5, the producer or the consumer will bear the least of tax burden, and the producer will bear the most of tax burden. Because according to assumption that the producer tried to increase the price to 4. In the first case, the producer tried to increase the prices to 4. Unfortunately, he cannot, because the demand is elastic. Elastic means the product has many alternatives, and it's easy to give up it when the price increased. So he could not increase the prices to 4. So at this point, there is an excess supply of goods. The prices declined to 3.25. So in this case, if demand is elastic,
not necessary for
yes, when demand is inelastic, elastic, yes. The product has many alternatives. It's easy to give up it when the price increased. In this case, the producer will bear the most of tax burden when the price increased, or when the government imposed a tax. So in this case, the consumer will bear the least of tax burden. The least of tax burden by how much? 0.25. 0.25. And the producer will bear the most of tax burden. By how much? 0.75. The summation of the taxes is $1. 0.25 plus 0.75, the summation is $1. It's the total tax per unit, right? The third case, when supply is a unit, or demand is a unitary elastic. Demand is a unitary elastic. Demand is a unitary elastic. A unitary elastic means the percentage of change in the price equals the percentage of change in quantity demanded. Like the demand for beef, it has 2 or 3 alternatives or 4 alternatives, right? So, suppose that the demand is a unitary elastic. The slope equals 1. This is E1, supply S1. This is E1. And suppose that the price equals 3. Quantity demanded is 10. Right? If the government imposed a tax of $1, supply would decline, so there is a leftward shifting of supply curve. So, as you see, from point A to point M, which is a point along S2, in this case, we have a new equilibrium point, E2. And the price would increase. As we mentioned that the producers or the producer will try to sell his product by 4, right? But at this price, the quantity supplied at M is larger than the quantity demanded at N, or QS is larger than QD. So the prices tend to decline to 3.5, right? So in this case, the consumer will bear half and the producer will bear half of the tax burden, right? So as you see, if demand is a unitary elastic, in this case, from A1 to M or QS, in this case, the producer will try to sell his product by 4, or he will try to make the consumer to bear the whole of tax burden, but he cannot, because at this point, quantity supplied is larger than the quantity demanded, so there is a surplus supply or supply surplus. So the prices tend to decline to restore the new equilibrium, E2. So the new price is 3.5. In this case, if the demand is a unitary elastic, the consumer will bear half of tax burden by 0.5, yes, and the producer will bear half of the tax burden, yes, 50 also, right? Yes. Beef, the demand for beef, لحم البقر. It has 3 alternatives or substitutes, like chicken, maybe other types of, yes, fish, other types of meat. Okay, what about the when demand curve is a vertical line or perfectly inelastic? Perfectly inelastic. The demand is a perfectly inelastic. Yes, perfectly inelastic, like the demand for insulin for the diabetic patient, as we explained before, like the demand for insulin. And increasing and the prices leads to no change in the quantity demanded, because the product is very important for the consumer. It's not easy, it's impossible to give up it when the price increase. So the demand curve would be a vertical line. D, and this is S1, E1. The price is 3 and 10 years for the quantities, P, Q. If the government imposed a $1 as a tax on insulin, in this case, there is a leftward shifting of supply curve to S2. We have a new equilibrium point, E2. The producer will try to sell his product by 4, and he succeeded. Yes, when the producer succeeded to sell his product by 4, this means the consumer bears the whole of tax burden, right? Because the product is very important. It's impossible to give up it when the price increased. So, as you see, the producer succeeded to bear or to make the consumer to bear the whole tax, right? So, if demand is perfectly inelastic, like the demand for insulin, the consumer will bear the whole of tax burden by 1. The whole of tax burden means 100% of the tax burden, or the consumer will bear $1, or 100% of the tax burden. Okay? The last case. Sorry?
No, producer will be
لا, this is all, we have to admit it. Yes. And the producer will bear 0 of the tax burden. The producer will bear 0 of the tax burden. What about the last case, when demand is perfectly elastic? Perfectly elastic means the product is not important for the consumer and it's easy to give up it when the price increased. And the demand curve is a horizontal line. So when demand is a perfectly elastic, when demand is a perfectly elastic, means the product has a high number of alternatives or substitutes. Okay? So the demand is a horizontal line, P, 3, D, Q. Suppose that this is supply curve, S1, and this is E1. Oh, sorry, yes. Supply S1, and this is E1. The price is a 3. Suppose that the government imposed a tax of $1. This leads to a leftward shifting of supply. But, so this is S2, E2. The producer will try to increase or to sell the product by 4. But he cannot, because the demand is a horizontal line. It's a perfectly elastic. So he will sell the product by 3. In this case, the producer will bear the whole of tax burden, right? So in this case, if demand is perfectly inelastic, in this case, the producer will sell the product by how much?
3.
By 3, right? So the consumer will bear, or the producer will bear the whole. So if the demand is perfectly elastic, the consumer will bear 0 of the tax burden by 0, and the producer will bear the whole of tax burden. By 100%. Right? What about supply? When supply is elastic, inelastic, unitary, perfectly, and so on. Let's go to analyze the tax burden and its relationship to the price elasticity of supply, or when supply is elastic, inelastic, and so on. The major point is when supply is perfectly elastic, it has the same effect the perfectly inelastic demand, right? So we have to analyze the same logic, or the opposite logic, or the opposite case. When demand is when supply is a vertical line, we have to analyze the relationship between the tax burden and supply as we work on the horizontal demand curve, right? So, when supply is inelastic, and its relationship with the tax incidence. Supply is inelastic. It has the same effect on the tax burden of elastic demand. So, inelastic supply equals elastic demand, and vice versa. Elastic supply or supply elastic, demand is inelastic, right? So, when supply is elastic equals elastic demand according to its effect on the tax burden. When supply or elastic supply and its effects equals inelastic demand. A unitary elastic supply equals a unitary elastic demand. Unitary elastic supply equals unitary elastic demand. Perfectly elastic supply equals perfectly inelastic demand. Perfectly inelastic demand. And the last case, perfectly inelastic supply equals perfectly elastic demand. Right? So let's start in the analysis. Who has a problem so far? Okay. So let's start to analyze the relationship between the price elasticity of supply and the tax burden. Number one, if supply is inelastic. Supply is inelastic, as we mentioned that it equals to elastic demand. Elastic demand means the product is not important, it has many alternatives, and it's easy to give up it. In this case, the producer will bear the most of tax burden, right? So, in this case, the producer will bear the most of tax burden, and the consumer will bear the least of tax burden, right? So let's start or draw the diagram. The price, quantity, and inelastic supply. Inelastic supply, it's close to a vertical line, S1. And we are going to deal with the demand curve as a unitary demand curve. تعاملوا معاه على انه unitary demand curve. Right? So, this is E1. Suppose that the price equals 3. Right? And the quantity is 10. If the government imposed a tax of $1, there is a leftward shifting of supply curve to S2. The producer will try to sell the product by 4. Unfortunately, he cannot. Because at this point there is an excess supply of goods, QX, QD. So we have a new equilibrium price, E2, which is 3.25. So as you see, in this case, when supply is inelastic, it has the same effect of elastic demand when the demand is elastic. In this case, the producer will bear the most of tax burden, and the consumer, as you see, bears the least of tax burden. By how much? So as you see, when demand or supply is inelastic, the consumer will bear the least of tax burden, and the consumer, the producer, will bear the most of tax burden. The consumer will bear the least. وبقديش? How much? 0.25. شفت قديش حملوا هنا؟ من 3 ل 25% حملهم لمين؟ للconsumer. So, as you see, in this case, the consumer will bear the least of tax burden by 0.25, and the producer will bear the most of tax burden by 0.75. Right? What about the elastic supply? When supply is elastic, it's similar to the inelastic demand. Elastic supply. It has the same effect of inelastic demand. Right? When the demand is inelastic, the consumer will bear the most of tax burden. Right? So, let's analyze P, Q. In this case, when supply is elastic, the consumer will bear the most of tax burden. خلينا نشوف بقديش وهذا least. ونشوف بhow much. Supply is elastic. S1, and this is the demand curve. D1, E1, price is a 3, 10. The question is, when the government imposed a tax over $1, there is a leftward shifting of supply curve to S2. As we mentioned that in this case, the producer will try to sell the product by 4. But as a result of the surplus supply or supply surplus, he could not. Or he can't. Because when there is an excess supply of goods, the prices tend to decline from 4 to 3.75. Right? So in this case, the producer succeeded to make the consumer bear the most of the tax burden by 0.75 or 75% of the tax burden. So when supply is elastic, as you see, in this case, the consumer will bear the most of tax burden.
25.
No, 0.75. The consumer, yes, will bear 75, 0.75, and the producer will bear the least by 0.25. Right? When supply is a unitary elastic. The third case is when supply is a unitary. So the last case, or the third case, when supply is a unitary elastic. Unitary elastic supply. It equals to a unitary demand. Unitary demand. This means that the consumer will bear half and the producer will bear half. Or 50-50. P, Q, and supply is a unitary elastic. S1, D1. When the government, this is E1, 3, 10. When the government set a tax of $1, in this case, there is a leftward shifting of supply curve to S2. The tax is as we mentioned that the producer will try to sell the product by 4. Unfortunately, as a result of the supply surplus, in this case QS is larger than QD, the prices tend to decline to 3.5. So, in this case, the producer can sell his product by 3.5. So, when supply is a unitary elastic, the consumer will bear half of the tax burden, or 50% of the tax burden, and the producer will bear 50% or half of the tax burden. Right? Okay. When supply is perfectly elastic. The fourth case is when supply is perfectly elastic. Perfectly elastic supply, as we mentioned, it equals to the perfectly inelastic demand. Right? Okay. So, suppose in this case, supply would be a horizontal line, S1, and demand, suppose it's a unitary, D1, E1, 3. When supply is elastic, perfectly elastic, it's similar to a perfectly inelastic demand. In this case, the consumer will bear the whole of tax burden. So, in this case, there is a leftward shifting of supply curve to S2. The producer will try, this is E2, 4. The producer tries to increase the product, or increase the price from 3 to 4, and he succeeded. So the consumer will bear the whole of tax burden. Right? So in this case, the consumer will bear 100, or the whole of tax, 100% of the tax burden. Got it.